Welcome to the Resilience Files, a podcast investigating human stories of struggle and triumph in the quest to explore the true nature of well-being and resilience and discover the secret to a resilience that lasts. My guest today, Shelli Epstein, author of Flying High, Life Lessons from the Big Top, went to see the Cirque du Soleil at London's Royal Albert Hall when she was just 11 years old. Shelli was mesmerized by the show and artists and decided that one day she would be up there performing on the world's biggest stages as a member of the troupe. This dream came true a decade later when Shelli became the running woman in Cirque du Soleil's critically acclaimed show, Luzia. In today's podcast, Shelly and I investigate and explore the immense grit, sacrifice, and discipline that seem to be lacking in our youth today. We look at her resilience and the healthy perspective that she was able to uncover as she came up against rejections, grappled with school life, was told to lose weight or lose her contract, lost her job in COVID, and faced career-ending injuries, leading her to ask herself, if I'm not a circus performer, what am I? The link to Shelli's book and website can be found in the notes. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Shelli's truly an inspirational example of a young girl who had a big dream and was willing to fall in order to fly. So Shelli, welcome to the Resilient Files.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks for coming. And I've got your book here, Flying High, Lessons from the Big Top. Really enjoyed reading it.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I have a whole bunch of questions to ask you.
I can't wait to answer them.
Okay, so let's go. So you started the book with a quote from Christopher Reeves, which to me, I just love him because he embodies everything that this podcast is going to be about. You know, somebody who, he lost what you would think was everything he needed to be Christopher Reeve, to be Superman, to be this famous actor. His physical capacity, all the kind of powers or health that we would think is necessary for a person to be okay inside. He lost that, and yet he didn't lose it, because within him, his life was meaningful, and he did the most amazing things, and he still loved life. He was just such an example of this innate built-in resilience that we're going to be talking about. So I love that you kind of started the book with him. So this is the quote that I loved. It says, "So many of our dreams at first seem impossible, then they seem improbable, and then when we summon the will, they soon become inevitable." So the reason I love this quote is I was thinking about my 10-year-old, who's my kind of only child at home at the moment, and he thinks he can be anything. He's still at that stage where he kind of feels that he can be an animator, or he can be a professional cyclist, or whatever kind of, and he's like, the hard thing is, he keeps saying he doesn't know which to be. But I know that the time will probably come when these things seem fantastical and almost, no, he thinks he has to follow some kind of more conventional route. So the question I had for you is when did you start to dream that you could become this kind of world, this actor, performer, and did your dream seem improbable?
So that's a great question, and for the beauty with children is that they have this naivety to them and it's so pure and it's so beautiful, and I think that's what we lose is when we grow up as adults. We lose that essence of we can choose and do whatever we want or put our minds to. So I think that is a really important lesson from our youth that we should take to our adulthood. For me personally, I remember I originally had a dream to go to the Olympics. I was a gymnast, and my dream was my inspiration at the time was Nadia Comaneci.
I love that film. I saw it so many times.
She was my all-time hero, and I was like, I wanted to follow in her footsteps. And as I grew older, I realized the reality of the probability of that dream actually occurring, and my parents had taken me to see a Cirque du Soleil show, and I saw the show, and afterwards I said, "Mom, Dad, that's what I want to do." I didn't even know there was another career outside of being a professional gymnast, which also you win the Olympics and it's not a sustainable long-term career. So after I saw Cirque du Soleil, I was like, this is the dream. This is what I want to do. I want to be able to flip around all day and do all these things. So that was when it really hit me. The other aspect I had was potentially being a stunt double, so being in movies and doing the stunt doubles on films. Again, both industries, I had no idea about either of them, so I was like umming and ahhing, and I naturally kind of took the path of circus. I have looked into the stunting world. It's quite a challenging industry to get into, but very fulfilling once you get onto the register.
Wow. So, but again, what's so interesting to me is that, I mean, I remember being a young girl and like having this unbelievable dream to be an actress, and I was doing drama classes, etc. But at a certain point, I just thought, that's not for me. That's for other people. Real people don't do that. And I love that you say that. You say, why? So, but most people, I think, go down my path of thinking, not me. That's for other people. My question to you is, how you were able to keep on with that, Do you think it was something in your... And because this is something I was reflecting on reading your story, in your childhood, in your parents, in their encouragement and their belief in you. I was just wondering if anything in your family background you think supported you to think you could achieve that.
My parents have always been super, super encouraging and never pushed me to do anything I didn't want to do. In all honesty, as a gymnast, I wasn't very good. I really wasn't that good of a gymnast, and I worked really hard. Someone actually told me, he said to me, you're not talented, but you work hard. And originally I took that as an insult. Yes. But later in life I realized, I was like, no, I deserve to be here. I put my all in it, and some things don't come as easy to me as for other people, but I will keep going and repeating until I get to that certain point. Throughout my journey and throughout my book as well, I definitely had moments in my life where I say I suffered from imposter syndrome. I had moments where I was like, what am I actually doing here? I'm not as good as these people. Like, I just felt like a fraud almost. So there is that, but self-belief and confidence is definitely something that has matured with me as I have grown older. I think when I was younger, I was definitely very shy and introverted, and I felt like I didn't always fit in, and I'm kind of remembered as that girl who went and did, the crazy thing of following my dream. But I don't think it's so crazy. It was what my heart was set on. It's what I wanted to do, and I just went for what I wanted. And I think people doubt themselves and don't believe in themselves enough to think that could be them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, first of all, you're a beautiful example of that. And I love that you say that I wasn't the most naturally talented. It wasn't that from the age of 4, where it seems that you went for started your career. People were like, wow, she's going to be a future Nadia. And the reason I love that is I was listening recently to a podcast with Gary Neville, and he was saying the same thing. He was like, I was the most untalented person on the Manchester United team, but yet I worked harder and as hard or harder than any other person, he said. And that's, I developed that talent through work.
Yeah.
And I think often kids think that, young people think that either you just have it, you're born a Messi or Ronaldo, or, and it comes easy, and you do work hard.
Yeah,
there's an aspect.
Yeah.
But I don't think they realize. So I love that you said that.
There is, like, within certain fields and stuff and industries, there is that, like, cutthroat almost that you have to be at a certain level, but there's nothing stopping you from getting there or giving yourself that opportunity to even get there, if you don't try, you never know. So
let me ask you another thing. To become, at the top of your profession, and I heard you saying that on another podcast you're on, that you like to call yourself an acrobat or circus performer, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
So to get to the top of being the top acrobat circus performer that you're going to perform in the Cirque du Soleil takes a lot of work, and that work is constant, very consistent. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, what did you sacrifice or feel that you needed to sacrifice as a young girl? You were talking about I remember there was a certain time that it was a 3 to 4 hour commute to go to the Crystal Palace Diving Center. And like what did you sacrifice?
So, yeah, and I mean, to be at a certain level or elite or whatever you want to define it, it comes with a price to pay, and you do sacrifice a lot. So for me, growing up, I don't say I sacrificed my childhood because I loved my childhood, but I didn't have a normal, I'm saying this with quotation marks, a normal childhood, because I didn't partake in a lot of activities that children normally would do. I would go to gymnastics, or I would go to school, I would come home. First thing I would always do was do my homework, because I set myself that discipline. If I didn't do my homework, then I couldn't go to gymnastics. That was more something I think my mom tried to instill. Yeah, exactly. And I just loved gymnastics so much. I just had this passion. It was fun. I do say this sometimes in training sessions. I would come out crying as well, because it's a disciplined sport. It's not the easiest sport, but there was just such a love for it. So yeah, I missed out on birthday parties. I missed out on a lot of social activities and things like that as well. But I think
it was worth it for you because it was so great a love and passion.
Exactly. It didn't feel like I had a loss, especially when I was a kid. I guess when reflecting as an adult, I'm like, okay, I did miss out, but I don't see any wrong in it.
You're pursuing your dream. The thing that I was thinking about so much, and I don't know if there's an easy answer to this, I for sure don't have one. So when I think about children of today, even when I compare myself to my youngest, and I've seen the deterioration from my eldest, because my eldest is now 26 and my youngest is 10, is that, he will do homework for 10 minutes and feel like it's the hardship that he's been through, right? And I just remember as a child, I'd come home and I'd work for 2 hours and he'd say, hours on my projects, on my things, etc. And so that thing to kind of work hard is, and I'm sure it's been affected by being able to touch buttons and, get what you want, and this kind of, era that we're in of quick, easy gratification. I wonder how we can instill that value of having to work hard back in our children. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I completely the same for me. I mean, I'm the eldest, and my younger brother and I only have one brother, but my younger brother is 10 years from me, and I can see a difference in our work ethic. But again, I don't know whether that's because I came from a sport. I think sport instilled discipline, and I think if more children found a sport that they loved, that would help drive them and give them motivation to work hard as well. I also think social media has ruined our the future generations, because it's living this life online, and even for myself, I find social media quite a hard thing to manage. It's a love-hate relationship. I think it's great in some aspects, but I think it's toxic in other aspects as well. And I think this is the kind of new world that we're living in, and it must be very hard on the younger generation for sure.
Well, I want to come to that later.
Yeah,
definitely, the thing of social media, because that's an important one. But what I want to ask you is, you speak about in your book about this kind of, it sounds like the first big disappointment of realizing that you weren't going to make the Olympics in 2012. So I wanted to ask you about that moment, like how it felt, if you can recapture those feelings, and also what you learned, how it shaped you going forward. But first, how the experience was like.
So obviously I was training as a young gymnast. I was training, I would say 4 to 5 times a week. Like, that was my life. I didn't have much of a life outside of it. And I remember I got gastroenteritis, and I actually was hospitalized, and I lost a fair bit of weight, and I became very, very weak. So when I went back to gymnastics, it was the first time I had realized I didn't have that love or passion for the sport anymore. And I also knew deep down, like, I wasn't going to make the cut. And I say this as well, I'm like, maybe I doubted myself at too young of an age if I had worked harder, but it was realizing that I didn't have that love anymore. And that was what was fueling me to train. So what's the point of training and pushing yourself if you don't enjoy it? So that was my first instance. I then switched styles of gymnastics to a display gymnastics. And that's where the fire rekindled and ignited that I loved the sport again, but in a different light. In the back of my mind, I was like, you know what? Okay, gymnastics might not be the sport for me, but who knows? There's other sports where the skills are very transferable, like trampolining and diving. So I was like, maybe I could pursue, that avenue. If I wanted it that much, I believe I would have pushed harder, and I didn't. It was more like, ifs and buts. I also thought because I have dual nationality, I was like, well, if I don't make it on the English team, I can make it for the Israeli team, or represent a different country.
Yes.
And I think, again, if it was something I really wanted, I think I would have pushed and gone after it more. But I enjoyed life. Like, the pressure of the sport was reduced when I switched to display gymnastics. It was, rather than being a soloist, like an individual, working as an individual sport, I then worked as a team and making friends and, building those kind of relationships, and then learning more of the performing aspect. And it opened my eyes, and obviously there was less commute as well. It was a lot more local. When I say as opposed to an hour and a half a day, it was like 10 minutes. So
that makes a big difference.
It makes a big difference. It gives you more time as well to do other things. And I think it all worked out for me in the end, and I have no regrets, and I can't complain.
Well, what I appreciate about what you're saying is that what I've discovered is that when a person is in what I'd call their well-being, right, kind of their selves, their options, like there's a certain clarity that emerges, and there's almost like pathways that emerge for us. And it sounds like, from listening to you, that's what happened to you. It was like one door closed down, and instead of, when you're not in your well-being, when you're feeling insecure, it's almost like everything shuts down. It feels like your whole world collapses and everything shuts down for you. But it felt like, no, like this door closed and others opened.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's an optimism and possibilities appear, and then it's just like, which door it's the mind's very flexible and very malleable. And it sounds like you were in that state where your mind was malleable and flexible and offered different.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I like that. So this is what I want to ask you. You spoke and touched on this earlier, and you speak about this in the book, but comparing yourself to others. So, as well-grounded as you seem as a person and describing yourself growing up, when you're in something that is competitive, you are auditioning, there are people around you who, as you're saying, are more talented, etc. How did you deal with the comparison part of it and still kind of maintain your own sense of, I'm good enough, I'm okay?
Yeah. So coming from the individual sport, that was very highly competitive. It's you against others. Then transitioning into a team, you're working as a team. So I kind of knew both aspects. When I went to audition for the circus, it was kind of the first time I was then thrown into that competitive environment, which I hadn't been in for a couple of years because I left the high-level gymnastics at the age of 12. And this audition was when I was 18. So my terrible math skills, 6 years?
Six.
Yes, I did it.
Yeah.
6 years. So it was a bit like, okay, you're fighting for your place, and people will do whatever they can. It's everyone's aspiration. Yeah. But again, I went in with a very open mind. I went in not with zero expectations. I wanted to understand and see the industry from the inside, and just be like, okay, what is expected of me? What do I need to learn? What kind of strength skills do I need to get better at? So next year I can come back and audition with confidence. And I passed the first audition day, and I got invited for the second audition day, and it was just a bit of it was such a weird experience because there were no expectations, but I just consumed it and took it in for whatever it was. Again, later I got offered, I thankfully got offered the contract, But when I went into the training situation, in Belgium, we trained for 3 months, and it's called a formation where you're getting ready to prepare for the show. So you train for the show for 3 months in Belgium, and then you get moved to where the show exists. I didn't realize that I thought I had signed a permanent 2-year contract. And I didn't realize that there were some people on a temporary contract and that they could play this game of switching, which I understand why they have that option, but it's also quite unfair. And that was where the competitiveness came in again. The girls who didn't have the full-time contracts, I think they felt that they had to prove themselves. And so they worked really hard. And maybe I, just wasn't working as hard as I could have. But I got pulled aside and my contract was taken away from me. The reason, they say, was because I was too young. I was 18 at the time. They knew exactly how old I was at the time.
I remember in your book you spoke about that moment where you were at some kind of event and you mentioned to a management team that you were a little bit scared. You just opened up and were a bit vulnerable. I'm away from home for the first time. And you felt that conversation was used against you. She's not ready. She's too young. Yeah. Which is such a shame. No. Because again, it's just such a human moment of saying what probably everyone was feeling.
Exactly. And they just used it against me, and I found it very unfair. And I was heartbroken. They were like, you'll still come to Macau for 3 months. And then that kind of gave me a bit more of an incentive. I was like, I'll prove you wrong. And I worked hard. But I was doing all the skills that everyone else was doing. There was no real comparison. I would say, yes, the 2 girls who were on those temporary contracts were stronger all-rounders. But the one was weaker in one area where I was stronger, and then she was stronger in one area where I was weaker. So it really depended what they wanted from us.
But the interesting thing is that, again, like there's like, just talking about that thread of resilience, is that those moments for people can really, I in my insecure life, it's almost like I divided into both, even though I have a lot of moments of insecurity now, but the one that was almost defined by that, non-resilience, whenever, and this still happens to me today, like my instinct often when I'm faced with rejection or you're not good enough is often to withdraw, to kind of run and protect myself. It's a human thing, you're not going to hurt me, so I'll just leave, I'll just excuse myself rather than you. And yours was like, I'll fight harder, which is a very resilient attitude. It's like, that's fine. Like you're entitled to think I'm not up for it. I think I am. And so I'll show you that I am. And again, I love that because it's so beautiful and it's so necessary and it's so needed and it's such a great role model. Because we're going to come up against people not believing in and all those stories of people who do well in life, they come up against all these moments 100%. Where people and life are saying to them, you're not up for this, and they say, no, we are, and they push through. It's like almost a theme. So it's so beautiful and hopeful and optimistic to see it in your story. It really is.
Yeah, I'll just finish on that. So when once all the contracts were resettled, there are some individuals who feel the need to continue with that competitiveness. Whereas the others kind of relaxed and we were all working in the same show as a team. The self-comparison thing really comes depending on, you can always look at someone and be like, wow, they're incredible, they're so much better than me, and put yourself down. Again, growing up, I learned where to acknowledge my own strengths and believe in myself more. And know where I am stronger, and also where I am weaker, and then work on those weaknesses, not to make them weaknesses and turn them into strengths.
Beautiful.
But later there comes a moment in my story, in my journey, where I was actually told to lose weight.
Yes, we're going to come there.
We're going to come there.
Yeah. Okay, but that was really and unbelievable. Yeah, I've definitely got that down. So it just sounds like you had a really healthy attitude towards that, which again, like if a person has what people would call a low self-esteem, I like to just say that their natural self-confidence has been covered. When that's the case, it's almost what I often talk about. It's a signpost that will naturally come up, is that we start comparing ourselves to others. it's just a natural human thing that when our well-being's covered, we start to compare ourselves to others. But if it's not, then you don't. As you say, you just look and go, okay, so I might have to work on this a little bit more, but it doesn't feel like it's doing anything to you. It doesn't feel like it's pushing you down or you feel bad.
I also think, with self-comparison, it's not always self-comparison. Like, I can look at someone in the street and just compliment them and just be a kind a human being. And I don't think that's a reflection of my insecurities either. It's just being a bit open. And I think the world needs a bit more kindness and to lift people up, because you don't know what people are going through either. They could be super insecure and comparing themselves to others, so
Definitely.
You never know.
Beautiful. So was there anybody like through this that you could think about, and maybe you didn't need this, but sometimes people would say there was this person or who really believed in me, who saw something in me, in moments when I didn't see that or where I was a bit vulnerable to seeing that. Did you have those people along the way?
So I definitely had great coaches. They definitely saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. I supposedly was always shy and never wanted to be in the limelight or the center of attention. And then that's now my career.
Yes.
And they saw that spark and they saw something. So I really have to acknowledge them. But also my parents. I know that might sound like cliche or cheesy, and just because they're my parents, people think that they have to say X, Y, Z. But I think they always saw and did truly believe in me and saw that I worked hard to get to where I was, especially even in my sport as well.
By the way, it's not cliched at all because, at the moment we're creating a parenting course, and part of it is saying to parents that if you could almost have laser eyes to see into what's in the heart and mind of your child, the health and the potential and their capacity to be able to do things and develop and grow and adapt and have this wisdom and have, what they need for life. Because often, when we kind of look at our kids and they're struggling with certain aspects, just normal things like your exam pressures and fitting in, parents worry and they focus on that. And so those kind of limiting behaviors, rather than seeing what's behind that, almost having the, the eyes to see the wholeness and the resilience in their children. So you saying that, you felt that your parents saw that in you is a beautiful thing. It's a very, very, I think, important thing, and often probably felt normal to you, But
no, I feel very lucky to have my parents.
Yeah, I know them and they're good people. So, I wanted to ask you about your struggles at school.
Yeah.
Because in spite of all of this, it's interesting. You speak about being almost a normal girl in school, struggling with the pressures and expectations of exams, and results, etc., which when we go into schools and speak to the thousands of kids, it's like the thing that they're all grappling with, the pressure and expectations of exam results, etc., and then also the part of fitting in, of socially, of having to be in that popular group, of having to be a certain way, be that naturally sociable person and fit in, etc. And it seemed like those common kind of the issues that children struggle with, you struggled with too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk a little about
that? Of course. I don't think I'm like academically smart, but I think I'm emotionally intelligent, and I think I have the university of life is what I say, and I feel like I have seen a lot and have been able to absorb and use that in my day-to-day life, and I feel like that honestly is one of the best educations I have had. But in school, yes, of course, the school will push you to get the best grades possible, and I didn't do terribly. I think if I had that drive and incentive to know what I wanted to do academically, maybe I would have done a bit better. But I think I chose subjects that were appealing to me, and I did decently in them. Socially, I didn't fit in the second school that I moved to, and it wasn't easy. I felt like I got along with the boys better than the girls, and I think the girls found that as a threat, but it was in a non-threatening way whatsoever. I just had more common ground with the boys, being sporty and more of a tomboy than a girly girl. And I didn't wear makeup. I didn't straighten my hair. I just didn't care how I looked. And it just wasn't important to me. So for me to find common ground with those girls was more of an effort, more of a struggle. And again, I had different ideas and things that I wanted to do in my life. So even at lunchtimes, I would sometimes, like, I remember eating in the girls' changing room just to either have my own space or be away from people, and then go into the dance studio and just have time for me and feel, it was, I would say, a way of like a release, almost like a de-stressor. That might have been seen as weird, not wanting to socialize. I do have I had a couple of good friends, but they had their own friendship groups as well. Like I wasn't a completely isolated, but I just didn't feel comfortable being in big crowds. And yeah, I looked out for me, and I think I needed that.
So I want to ask you something about that, because when you describe that, and I'm not sure if it's just because time's passed, etc., or you got, because when I think about myself, like feeling like I didn't really fit in, and I actually was in the popular groups, but even when I was there, I felt like you're talking about an imposter, and I felt insecure, and I felt like, I didn't feel comfortable, but it was painful. Like I remember when I sat in the bathrooms at times, because they seemed to be leaving me out, or I couldn't get into the conversation or something, or, they'd got together and not invited me or something. I felt so alone. Like that's the time I go home and listen to Pink Floyd and the final cut and start to cut myself and listen to, Smashing Pumpkins and, get really morose and melancholy. Was it because you had this thing that you loved, this passion? Did that kind of keep you a little more stable or centered?
I think definitely, because after school, I would go home, do homework, and then I would go to gymnastics, to gym. And I would have my people there who were similar to me, did this thing outside of school. I had friends there that I could talk to. And I don't know, I just felt more me in that environment than at school.
So you had your place where it's an interesting thing, because I'm thinking about think about my eldest child, who was, at times you could say a little bit more socially, not as gregarious and outgoing and natural with people. And yet as he grew older, he developed his own interest. Like he had a love for professional cycling. He didn't actually cycle professionally, but he was an administrator. I don't know if they realized he was underage on one of the main kind of cycling, boards, that commented on professional cycling and that kind of thing. And he found his own places to express himself. And then he kind of came and fitted in where he fitted in, but he almost had his own loves and passion that were his things. And it sounds like, if we could encourage our children to find their place, a place where they're naturally comfortable. Yeah. And those things don't seem to have so much power on them. Okay, so I don't fit in 100% into the social circle. That's okay, because I've got my place where I feel myself, and I can cope with that amount of discomfort,
Yeah.
It doesn't start to become so extreme. Yeah, it's interesting. So there's another quote I want to quote from your book. There's many quotes in this book. Yes. But there's something. So this is the quote. The real act of discovery consists not in finding new lands, but in seeing with new eyes. And I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. I've actually Marcel Proust. Do you know how to pronounce that?
That is correct.
Is that correct? So the real act of discovery consists not in finding new lands, but in seeing with new eyes. But tell me what you mean by that. Well, why did that quote appeal to you?
So for me, this is the quote of the chapter that speaks about travel, and it was moving abroad. So harnessing, well, again, just going with an open mind. I think I was very young. I was 18 years old when I left home, and I had this naivety to me. I was very ignorant and maybe, I guess, a bit sheltered to the world. But I was like a sponge. I just kind of absorbed everything around me and just kept my eyes open and just went into everything with a very open mind and just took it as it came. yes, I had my highs and lows, but it taught me so much more about myself and like what life actually is and what it has to offer. So I think that's my personal interpretation.
And I love that because again, like where it resonated for me was that, you know, I speak about like when I tell my own story that I was living in London at a time and I was hating London and I was hating life and I hated the weather and I didn't like the people and I felt like all those things were getting in the way of me like being able to feel okay. Like if I could be living in Hawaii and all these different situations and circumstances, you know, in a new land, then I would be okay. And after I'd had my insight, which I spoke about, it's almost like I woke up with different eyes. You know, I call them now like resilient eyes. And through those eyes, London just looked like an incredible place. I fell in love with the city. The weather didn't seem a problem. The darkness, the grey, there was something magical and mystical about it. You know, the people who had seemed so unfriendly now seemed beautifully reserved in a way that just through that, if you could pierce through the reservation, there was just this warmth and this depth. and so my eyes changed, but nothing else changed. But I woke up and like my world felt different going forward. So that's why I love that, you know. So I want to now go back to what you mentioned, the eating the food thing, because that kind of horrified me, as I'm sure it will many people who read the book. And you speak about what happened with your kind of weight. And could you just describe that? And then you can maybe talk about how that affected you.
So the first time, we get weighed. Well, the boys get weighed on a regular basis. The boys get weighed once a week for their bungees to make sure that the bungees are the appropriate weight for them. The girls, we get weighed maybe every 6 months. But moving from Belgium to Macau, we did a weigh-in. And it was the first time a few of us got pulled aside and were like, okay, you've gained like, and it wasn't even anything significant. It was like 2 kilos.
2 kilos.
Exactly. They're like, okay, you're a bit.
I feel like I just like eat supper.
I know.
2 kilos.
It's so silly. And they were like, okay, just keep an eye. And we're like, oh, you know, it catches you off guard. And you're like, okay. And then nothing was said. And I was there for about, I would say, a year. And then I got called into the office and they were like, look, we've noticed you've, like, physically I looked a bit more swollen. And they were like, you've gained weight. We need you to lose X amount by this date. If not, we will not renew your contract. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it wasn't, they went about it in a terrible way. And I learned a lot about myself.
When you say that went about it in a terrible way, what would have been a good way?
I think they should have taken off, not used my contract as a threat.
Yes.
And the way that the physios that they gave me to someone, the way that they dealt with it, really, I don't think they realized the repercussions of their actions that can cause on an individual. So I was every Monday after the second show, I would have to go up and stand on the scale and print out this little piece of paper that they would then keep. I would have to keep a food diary and give it to them at the end of the week as well. They would make me wear a heart rate monitor, put me in certain training sessions and make sure that I was training effectively. And there were a few other things, but it was just, and then there was no, after I lost, I think it was maybe 6 kilos.
6 kilos?
Yeah, I understand where they were coming from because I wasn't the same weight as I was when I came in. I didn't realize I had this hormonal issue. And once I realized the weight and I resolved it, the weight fell off of me. And they were like, see, you can do it. But that wasn't because of my eating. And I was running every morning. Macau's very humid, so I'd sweat a lot. I did things in quite an unhealthy way, but I panicked and all I wanted to do was obviously keep my job. But having to write every day, then even after, they never said anything when I hit the number that they wanted me to weigh. They were like, okay, you can stop doing this. That was the end. There was like, you know, it wasn't dealt with very nicely. But after that, I was a bit traumatized, and every day then, or every week, I would then print off this piece of paper. I would clip it into my own diary and write everything I ate. And I don't believe that I had an eating disorder, but I think I was definitely on the verge, and it was not healthy. It wasn't a sustainable way to live my life either.
Yes.
If I reflect back, my energy levels, like, to maintain that weight was not healthy. And I hit their target, then I set targets for myself, and I was like, can I get to this? And it just wasn't the right way. I remember even at one stage, I was so desperate. I tried to make myself sick, and I physically couldn't. And then I took laxatives to do whatever I could to lose weight quickly, which is the most unhealthy way, and it's not the right way to go about it at all. They should have made me speak with a nutritionalist or a personal trainer to actually figure out my body's needs, my basal metabolic rate, and then the macros that my body needs to work efficiently, because the way that they just kind of were like, do whatever you need to do, it was not right. It really wasn't. And I was 19.
Wow.
And
do you think it's changed today? Do you think, like, today, and was this in the Cirque du Soleil, or was this in the one?
Yes, this was in another company.
Do you think that people would handle that differently? Like, do you think things have been learned like that was? How many years ago was that?
Wow, I would say 9 years.
So it's almost a decade ago.
Yeah.
I think that things have moved on, that they would handle it differently today.
I would like to think in the best way possible. Yes. It depends on who is in charge and what resources they have. The people who are there for our health and mental well-being as well, or the physio department, they definitely should be educated and have the correct knowledge. And if they don't, refer us to where we can. And I think now, yes, but I've also seen it on the same show in the other direction. One girl definitely had an eating disorder, and they just turned a blind eye, and I think that was terrible as well, and not dealt with and managed, because that's also very dangerous and unhealthy.
Yeah. But Shelly, I think it's just a real, like, tribute again to you, that because that kind of period, which sounds like it was challenging, it sounds like you almost got sucked down that rabbit hole. It's like you, but there was some kind of grounding and resilience that kept you centered, so you didn't develop on a go forward basis and you think, then a lot of goals
I know
a lot of goals got sucked into that thing, and
I kind of literally woke up one day and was like, I've had this book, and I was like, you know what, this is not doing. I just burnt it. I just went to one of the barbecue things, and I just set it on fire. It was very therapeutic, and it was just a way to let go. And I was like, I don't need this. And
brilliant, eh?
Yeah,
there's something so powerful about that and so empowering. I'm saying, because it's like, it really, really is. It's beautiful. Good for you.
Thank you.
So, the running woman. Is this the running woman?
That's the running woman, yes.
I call it butterfly woman.
Yeah, the butterfly.
Absolutely stunning. Like, was that the, like, pinnacle of you, like, kind of reaching your dream, that kind of role?
I mean, my dream was the first time I got contacted by Cirque du Soleil, even being put forward as a potential candidate to one of their shows in Las Vegas. I was like, oh my gosh, wow, this is going to happen. This is real.
Yes.
I really didn't care what the job was. I was just so excited to work for them. Then my professional partner and I had submitted our duo trapeze act to Cirque du Soleil. That the job in Las Vegas, they didn't go with me in the end, and everything happens for a reason. It was probably for the better, and it was. So my professional partner and I put forward our act, and they said to him, was like, oh, we have a position, we really need you, but to him only. And we hadn't really negotiated anything with it amongst ourselves. So I was like, you know what, take it. He was like, no, let me see, maybe we can. I was like, don't worry, we'll figure it out. But he put my name forward for the same show, and they were like, unfortunately, there's no positions for Shelly right now, but maybe we'll come up with something. A couple of months later, I get a phone call, and they were like, oh, okay, so we have this idea. We want this character that we need a main character, but this main character is also going to fly Russian swing to swing. And I was like, oh my God, Russian swing to swing. It was the one act I was like, I will never do that act. I hated Russian swing on the previous show. I was like, oh. And I just was kind of like, yeah, sure. And I just said yes. I literally just said yes. And I was like, I'll deal with it if and when I get there, you know, like if I hate it, I'll quit. If I'm terrible, they'll fire me.
So like, you just said yes.
I just said
yes. Show up.
Yeah. And so I had to first I had to get selected. So it was myself amongst, I think, 5 other candidates. And the director selected us. It was all virtual. It was all through video submissions. And he said he saw something in my eyes. And I was like, oh my goodness, wow. And also I was thinking, how have I gone from being like a generalist in a house troupe role where you're like the ensemble to being a main character? I've had no training, no experience. I was like, wow. I couldn't believe that was my future. I was like, it was too good to be true. And that's also where the imposter syndrome kind of came in creation, especially because I felt like I had all these skills and avenues I could explore, but creation was quite a hard time for us, and not all those avenues were pursued. I felt like I was very bubble wrapped and looked after, just, you know, in case I got injured or something. But I broke away eventually and spread my wings. And it was an incredible journey, and I still can't believe that I've kind of not left a legacy, but I've left my mark on Luzia, and I am known as the running woman, butterfly lady.
Incredible. I think what's so beautiful about that is it's almost like you've got a theme throughout your life of showing up, of saying yes, right?
Yes.
And when you do that, these opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I just think that's fantastic. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So I want to read some of the critics' responses after your first show from your book. So I'm just highlighted here, and this is about the show in general. It says, Luzia was an absolute pleasure to watch, not just for the high-octane tricks, but as a spectacular and cohesive theatrical experience that was successful on every level. If you've skipped seeing the Cirque for a few years, this is truly a show to bring you back to the fold, into the fold. Bravo. And then specifically about you, it says, Shelli Epstein as the emblematic running woman was superb, strong, beautiful, and in possession of buckets of stage presence. So, as you say, not bad for the former child gymnast with one so shy of the spotlight, right? So the thing I wanted to ask you is, you know, you talk about imposter syndrome and that. How does it feel to get that kind of response? And does it feel like it's going to put a lot of pressure on you because you could get the opposite? Like, how did you deal with that kind of pressure and response and accolades? And
I still, like, every time I see a poster, it's like I get so excited. I just still can't believe that's me. Once I'm on stage, I do mention, as soon as the makeup goes on, it's kind of like a mask, and I'm not Shelly anymore. I am embodying this character. And yes, she is a part of me, and I'm a part of her. And obviously, I've left a little piece of me for the future, whoever plays this role. And it taught me both ways. I learned a lot about myself, and I also developed as a performer. And it was a phenomenal journey. With critics, you will always have positive and negative, and it's not to let it get to you. But also sometimes I've had moments where I've rewatched myself on stage and I cringe. I'm like, oh, why did I do that? And you get a positive reaction, and it does confuse you. So yeah, it also depends where and what you're watching. On a technical level, if I watch Russian swing, the audience doesn't know technicalities as well as the artists. But if it's more the performance side, whereas I'm doing the opening scene where I'm doing the running, I don't think I have had a critical comment on that scene. So
yes, so you didn't have to deal with that.
I didn't have to deal with that, and hopefully never. I'm sure the artistic director, maybe on a bad day, was like, you need to snap out of it, or you know, do something within you. But I try not to bring my personal life onto stage, as soon as you're on stage, you let go of whatever else is going on in your life, and you let it out. And it should always be as if it's, I mean, it is the audience's first time seeing it, but you need to perform as if it's your
every
first,
time, first time.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because like part of like my coming from was that I was so sensitive as a little girl and growing up to criticism, because I had like some people in my early life who were highly critical of me, and I was super sensitive around that. And part of my like kind of learning and journey was to see that, you know, I'd kind of what I call outsourced or attached my sense of self-worth to other people's approval. So it meant that when people approved and were happy with Terry, it felt like it boosted my well-being. And it felt like when people weren't, it kind of sucked it away. And so there was like kind of this locus of power outside of me. And kind of when I started to feel more secure from inside of me, it's almost like I could now more, and not all the time, but I could have people either appreciate or not appreciate me. And it could almost just feel like it's information for me, but my stability or core could be within me. And I could appreciate a little bit, like you're saying, well, maybe in the criticism, there's something there that I can learn from.
Yeah,
and maybe it's just that person's kind of view, which there isn't much, but I'm open to hearing. I'm not always like that. There are moments where my first response can be feeling that kind of, oh, this is sucking away my self-worth, and I get a bit defensive or a bit etc. or down on. But then I seem to be able to come back to this place, and it's just something that I feel, especially with social media, is so important for kids to take that kind of locus of power and see that their self-worth is not defined what other people think.
No, absolutely not.
And, you know, and I'm sure, like, especially when you're in that competitive world, it's so important to kind of have that sense of security inside of you. Otherwise, you're probably like a yo-yo up and down every single day.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. So, COVID hit, right? And what happened then?
So with COVID, we all unfortunately lost our jobs, and none of us really knew for how long. I think we thought 2-3 months and didn't expect the worst. So we, all became unemployed, and we all had the hope for Cirque du Soleil returning later. I would say after we all were, what's the correct terminology, released, let go.
Yes.
Yeah.
How many of you were there in the Cirque du Soleil?
Well, I actually, on our show, artists, we were, I believe we were 48, including musicians. And with the technical team, we're 130 something.
Wow.
That's every one show.
Yeah, so that show.
There were 25.
Wow.
So across the world. So we were actually in Russia when COVID hit. The technical team had just set up our stage so we could start training. The artists just arrived, and we went to immigration, and the next day they said, okay, everyone's going home. And we got sent home, and they were like, we'll be in touch. We then got let go. And then we found out that Cirque du Soleil went bust.
Oh, really?
Yeah, $900 million of debt.
Really? Hey?
Yeah, it was pretty bad. So none of us, we were a bit like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Is Cirque du Soleil going to return? That kind of left everyone in the unknown and just so much uncertainty. The company was rebought.
Yes.
And a year later, there were rumors that Cirque du Soleil was returning, and they were reaching out to certain shows to relaunch for 2022. And Luzia was one of the first shows to be contacted. So they contacted us, and they offered me a position. And I was so excited to go back, and we started training in October 2021 in Wakefield, to move to London in January 2022 to relaunch the show. Bits between that, though, I had this personal training qualification that I had never used, and I was like, this was always my backup plan. If anything, happens, let's use it. So I built my own personal training business, took on clients, worked for a couple of gyms. Lockdown 1 actually is where I started writing my book.
Okay.
And I had never gone to university, and I started thinking about the future and was like, what am I passionate about? And what do I think I need if I need a career later down the line? And I went down the route of sports psychology. So I did a module with Open University in sports psychology, and now I'm currently studying or training how to be a life coach. And I would love to merge the sports psychology and the life coaching together to help acrobats, performers go through that transitional process. For myself, it hasn't been an easy process. I definitely suffered with an identity crisis of who am I, and I think COVID didn't help. And you kind of got a taste with it with COVID, and you realize that this isn't a long and sustainable career, that you do need something for the future. So I try to prepare myself for the future, but I do and would love to still go back to performing, even if it's for a little bit.
So I've got a few questions around that. First of all, when you say you went through an identity crisis,
yes,
like that was tough, or will you just tell me a little bit more about that identity?
So the first time it really hit me was in 2019. I got injured and I was sent home, and I had never been sent home from tour before. So I was sent home. It wasn't a severe injury as I have had this year, but it wasn't great, and I got sent home to do my rehabilitation. It was the first time that I was separated from the show, and my identity was the show, and I only realized that having been separated, and I was like obsessive almost. Even with the time difference, I was like, I knew exactly what they were doing. I was like, the show is about to start, and I couldn't let go. I couldn't detach myself from it. And I was like, okay, I've just got to heal. I got to recover so I can go back and do what I love. As time moved on, I kind of let go a little bit, and I kind of finally was like, okay, I have friends in the UK, and also London was very foreign to me. I hadn't lived in London for years. It was since I was 18, and I left in 2012. So
wow, yes, most of your kind of adult life outside of London.
So I was like, oh, you know, I never identified with London being home. So it was weird. It was weird for me. And it was also in the beginning, everyone's so excited to see you. You see everyone. And then everyone goes on with their normal lives. And I just felt a bit trapped in London. I was like, I'm just here to do my physio. I'm going back to do what I love. But by the time I was ready to go back, I was like, oh, I'm actually happy in London. You know, I was like, I kind of enjoy where I am. Can I stay a bit longer? But it all worked out. I actually came back not so long later for some PR for the show in September 2019. I went back to the show in August, and then the show came to London in January 2020 to perform, and I got to perform at the Royal Albert Hall, where I first saw my first Cirque du Soleil show, and I was sitting in the audience watching, and I was like, that's what I want to do. Then I got to be on the stage and hopefully inspire the younger generation and get little girls or little boys to be like, that's what I want to do. And it's just, it was phenomenal. I'm so grateful and so lucky that I had that experience.
That's amazing. Amazing. You know, it's interesting when you talk about your identity being so defined and kind of enmeshed with that. And again, like, just speaks to kind of the health in you, that you are able to adapt and to almost create a life outside of that and find Shelly outside of that. Because you had mentioned earlier that role, that main role of Luzia, was a part of me. You said not a whole of me, but it seems like it can seep in and without us realizing, and we realize, no, we somehow now are defining that. And I remember when there was a time when Ahat was doing work with an academy, a football academy in the Premier League, and we were working with the youngsters. And part of what they brought us in for is so that they didn't identify themselves as being a football player, because about 80% of them were going to be cut. They weren't going to make the senior team. And that kind of destroyed these young people, because they were so attached to this identity and see, like, this is something I enjoy and love doing, but there's more to me, something
absolutely
deeper, and I can find my loves and what's next for me, etc. So it's fantastic that you were able to navigate that. You know?
And so with COVID, that was the second time I got that taste of the identity crisis. With my job being taken away from me, I was a bit like, oh, okay, what can I do? I had this personal training qualification. I was like, let's dive into it. it didn't fill me with the same passion. So I know that's not necessarily the correct avenue, but I did enjoy it, and don't mean to be boastful, but I'm good at it, and it's
beautiful.
And I haven't.
But let's stop for a second, because that's so nice to say that I'm good at it, right? And it's almost funny that you have to say I don't mean to be, as if we're apologetic to say like I'm good at this, you know.
But I've worked with the human body for so long. I understand how it moves, and I can see corrections very, like what people need to tweak and correct very easily. But my heart isn't in it. I feel there's something missing, and I need more. So with the sports psychology, I find it absolutely fascinating. And I didn't even realize, after having studied, I didn't even realize that I dealt with a lot of some of the topics, like dealing with stress and anxiety, and how I naturally use specific tools to help suppress those nerves and energies. And I think it's very, very interesting, and I am excited if I can merge the two to help others, and that's my ultimate goal.
So just so I understand, how did the story end? Like, where did it? Because where did you leave the Cirque du Soleil? Like, what was how did that happen?
It's a very sad story, and I'm glad I've ended it where I did, because I could continue. I could write book 2. We'll see. But yeah, this story, there was a lot of excitement, and it ended quite sadly. So yeah, as I mentioned, in 2021, Cirque du Soleil came back, and we got hired. I signed to go on to reopen the show in London in 2022, and then go on tour. On the night before the big premiere, I sustained a very horrible injury during a performance. The night before was a dress rehearsal. The day that I hurt myself was called a private preview. It has a live audience, but it's not the premiere. Okay. The premiere is that there was press and media there, but the premiere is where they invite everyone and they make a big deal out of it. And I got injured, unfortunately, during the private preview. I was in denial for quite a long time, and
could you carry on with the show, or did you have to actually stop during the show?
So I got hurt. I stood up. I said, "I'm okay. I'm great."
Yes.
And I took my next position, and I just took a moment. I sat on stage, and I kind of did a body scan. I was like, "Is my head, shoulders, knees, foot?" I was like, "I think I'm okay." And then I stood up, and I put weight on my left leg, and it was like jelly. I was like, "Oh no." It's like something isn't right. And then someone came up to me. I still had another 2 or 3 tricks to do, and my pusher, he came up to me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't think so." And I just walked. I just walked off stage. I walked backstage, down the stairs, and then I said, "Could someone call physio, please?" And I had to wait, because Russian swing is a very dangerous act, and the physios watch, and they're on standby if, God forbid, anything happens. I wasn't an emergency, because I jumped up straight away. I gave the thumbs up, and I was okay. That was adrenaline, I'm sure.
Yes.
And I didn't do the second option, which is where you say, "I'm not okay," and you do a show stop, and they would come onto stage and help you get off stage. So I waited for physio. I went back to the physio room. They took my shoe off. They assessed my foot, and that's where the nausea started to kick in. And I was like, okay, something's not quite right. Went to A&E, did an x-ray, and thankfully, supposedly nothing was broken, but they didn't see it in the x-ray. And the next day I did an MRI, and that's kind of where I got the bad news, and I had my first surgery at the end of January.
Well, your foot was broken.
I tore my deltoid ligament, and I tore my Liz Frank ligament, which I'm still very confused if it's a ligament or a bone, because on the x-ray you can see that there's a gap, but I believe there is a ligament that's holding it, and that was gone, so that's why there was a gap. So I don't know if it's a break or...
But either way, it was a serious injury.
It was a serious injury,
yeah.
So...
We're not going to be back.
No, the reason I started crying when I was in physio was like, oh, I'm going to miss premiere tomorrow. It's like, okay, worst case, I don't do Russian swing. I just do Running Woman.
You still thought that?
I thought I was fine. I really, really wasn't. I couldn't bear weight on my foot for the next 5 months.
So how does it go with this?
It happened in January.
Oh, so this is
recent.
Recent.
Yeah.
And so does that mean, was that the end of it, or are you thinking I'm gonna get right and then go back?
So what normally, if I was offered a 2-year contract to end in June 2023. That for some reason gave me anxiety and stress, and I was like, oh, I've just established my life in London. I want to do London, I want to do Barcelona, and then I think I want to make the decision that I am done with this stage. The fact that I got injured has now taken that away from me again. So if I had signed the contract till 2023, I would finish my rehab and go back to the show. But because I didn't sign that contract, I negotiated and I signed a short-term contract. My contract has officially ended. Yes. I am looked after until I'm in good health, but technically there is no position for me to return to. They've already redone the casting. If, however, there may be a situation where they need me, I will be so happy to go back, short term. But for the future, for now, I will not be returning to Luzia, but you never know.
And so does that kind of feel like a loss? I'm sure it feels like some kind of a...
It definitely did. Again, I went through like the 6 stages of grief almost. It was a hard, like it does feel like a loss because again, it's a massive part of me. It's a massive part of my life. Yeah. And again, with COVID was kind of took my job away from me. And now this injury took the job away from me. And I really want to make that decision of when I am done, and all these external factors are kind of getting in the way. But I have watched the show a number of times when they were in London, and I said goodbye to everyone, and that kind of left me with good closure and peace, and I feel content. And yeah, you never know what the future holds. The same with the injury, and in the beginning I was like, oh my gosh, but you can't dwell. Like, I'm injured, it's not going to change the situation, it's not going to heal me any faster. So I just had to see the positives and take every day as it comes. It definitely hasn't been an easy year, but it's opened my eyes to other opportunities and possibilities and passions of mine that for me, when I am officially done with performing, these avenues that I can go down, and performing hopefully will always be an option. It doesn't have to be this or that. Hopefully I can eventually do both.
You're a performer, right?
Yeah.
That's a part of you, as you said. It's not, that doesn't have to define you, but it's a part of you.
Yeah, of course.
I think what's beautiful just about your story, again, is just the humanness of these things that come up that we're not expecting, as you say, which almost seem to get in the way of where we think is going to happen. Yes. And navigating those. And at first almost as a resistance, so we feel victimized, and it's such a human thing, right? And then to see it's almost like the mind has a period of adjustment and then comes back and sees different possibilities and just allowing it to adjust, etc. Because often in those times we can catastrophize, and we can have people around us who catastrophize, and everybody's like kind of colluding with poor me and this is terrible and etc. A lot of people get stuck in that, right?
It's very easy to, and I just see how me.
Yeah, and it's not, and that's beautiful. And I'd love to say it's not any of us. You said that part of us which is so knows that deeply can get covered. It can lose itself. And so, it's beautiful that was so vibrant in you and so alive that you could keep kind of coming back to it.
I do believe everything happens for a reason. Right before that, I had COVID. So there was, again, this possibility of me not performing in premiere because of COVID. I tested negative the day before. And I was allowed to do the dress rehearsal and I got to do all the trainings and stuff. So there was something in the universe that just didn't want me on stage. And I'm a strong believer that everything happens for a reason. And I might not see it in the grand scheme of things now. I might not see it now, but in the grand scheme of things, I might see later down the line of the reason why. And hopefully it's a positive.
Well, what you were saying before about school, and it's probably one of my things with the education system, is that you're saying the real learning, the real teaching, the real education is in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like I believe these moments are lessons for us, but beautiful lessons that are put there because we can learn something that evolves us, that progresses us. And at first, as I say, it's like tough, some of these lessons, because they're meant to carve out or there's something that has to be stripped away in order for us to almost create something new, to bring something new into this world. And so those moments aren't easy, but if we could see them as teachable moments, then there's so much we can learn through them. And it sounds like you're a great student of life. So thanks, great. So have one more thing. There's a beautiful quote again, right near the end of your book. And I don't know if it's, again, the name Bo Taplin.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who was Bo? Okay, well, it's a pretty beautiful quote by Bo. Perhaps the butterfly is proof we can go through a great deal of darkness, yet become something beautiful. And I love that. Perhaps the butterfly is proof that we can go through a great deal of darkness, yet become something beautiful. In the first book I wrote something about when it's dark enough, we can see the stars. Mm-hmm. And again, it just like speaks to me about this thing that it's in these dark moments that we learn something, that a butterfly emerges. I don't know if the butterfly can emerge without going through that thing of the metamorphosis, being a caterpillar. It's not possible. And yet I feel that young, not just young people, because its parents are so worried about their children going through that metamorphosis, through that struggle, and they want to make it easier and prevent it. We talk a lot about snowplow parenting, just snowplowing so that their kids can ski down that slope with ease, or helicopter fixing, etc. So our kids don't have to go through that metamorphosis. But there's something to me that is that metamorphosis, are those hard moments that's why we become that butterfly. That's why you could be butterfly woman, because you went through all the disappointments and and all those little challenges along the way, and then you were ready to become butterfly woman. So, what does that quote mean to you?
I have so many butterfly quotes, but I love that one. I also agree, similar to what you said, that every positive does have its, everything in life does come with that counterbalance, and you do have to go through those hardships to get to the other side. Nothing in life is going to be that straight, easy road, and you do have to work for it. And I think you do have to go through those challenges in order to enjoy and also embrace the beauty of what life has to offer.
Mm-hmm. And when you go through it, there's something in you that, like, there's a triumph.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
It's difficult, and I got through it. It's an amazing experience because you feel more confident in your own ability to get through something. So I guess the last thing is new phase of your life. Yes, it sounds like, correct. What are you learning or reflecting on right now?
So for me, as I've kind of mentioned, one of the biggest struggles is going through this transitional phase of being a performer into the normal world, I guess. And it doesn't necessarily have to apply to the high-level athlete, the professional performer or entertainer. I think there's so many different transitions in life that we make throughout our lives, like maybe finishing school, going to university, or switching jobs. You go through those transitions and you might feel lost. And I want to help people with that process, mainly, obviously, particularly, I would focus on the niche and the avenue of my expertise, which is the performing world. But if I can help anyone, if and when or how, through that journey and process to make it a little bit easier, it would be such a pleasure. So that's something I'm looking to develop and build, is helping people go through that transitional change, so they don't feel so alone or don't have to dive in so deep. And hopefully it's a little bit of a shallower dive than what it could be, because it's not easy. And
but it doesn't have to be as difficult as people think. I think you're a great person, Shelly, to guide young people, through that, young or old, but through that, because you've had so many of those moments, and just the kind of, the resilience and adaptability and the courage that you had through them, but also the honesty to say they are tough moments, but we can do them. And I think you're going to be a great person to guide people. So good luck with that.
Thank you so
much. And thank you so much for coming today. And really, once again, if anyone wants to read Flying High, Life Lessons from the Big Top, it's a beautiful book, and it's also got tremendous pictures within here of Shelly as... I call you Butterfly.
I love it. Perfect. Butterfly.
And really just of the magic of the Cirque du Soleil. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please follow or subscribe so that you can stay up to date with our latest episodes.